The boy's body trembled violently. He stood naked, blindfolded, his bare feet blistering on the heated stone of Marduk's great temple. The air hung thick with sacred incense, but what dominated was the stench: scorched flesh, ancient blood, and the cold sweat of terror. Around him, masked figures in lion cloaks chanted in a forgotten tongue, summoning something not entirely divine. One priest stepped forward, raising a hooked bronze tool, still slick with oil and blackened by flame. The moment metal met skin, his scream split the silence like a dagger in the dark. This wasn't a rite of passage. It was an offering, not of lamb or grain, but of purity and pain. Outside, Babylon danced in harvest celebration. Inside, the gods demanded agony. By dawn, he would no longer be a virgin. But what he became was far more disturbing. And no one, not even the records, dared to remember him. What truly happened behind the sacred gates of ancient Babylon? Why did the Ku Erish, a ritual so secret it was almost erased, survive only through whispers and fragments? And why do some modern scholars still refuse to translate it fully? There's a detail here that changes everything, and no one seems ready to face it. Before we go further, if you value stories that history tried to bury, subscribe now. We're close to reaching a major milestone, and your support is what keeps this channel alive. Every new subscriber helps us bring these buried truths back into the light. Thank you for being here. Babylon wasn't just a city. It was a living organism of belief, mathematics, and divine authority. At its heart were not kings or warriors, but priests. Temples weren't mere places of worship. They were command centers of spiritual and political power. The great Temple of Marduk, the supreme deity of the Mesopotamian pantheon, towered above the city, its ziggurat reaching toward the heavens, as if trying to command the world below. Within those sacred walls lived the Kashu, boys of noble lineage chosen to serve the god Marduk. This wasn't a calling. It was destiny, imposed. These boys were raised in isolation, immersed in sacred texts, fasting and practices that today would be condemned as psychological and physical abuse. Yet at the time, all of it was justified under the weight of divine purpose. To be chosen as a sacred virgin was not just an honor, it was a death foretold. To outsiders, the Kashu appeared angelic. They walked in white-robed processions, praised by crowds, treated as living vessels of the gods. Foreign emissaries described Babylon as a place where the priests hold the heavens in scrolls and the lives of kings in their hands. But what those outsiders never saw, or chose not to see, was the cost behind the curtain of gold and incense. In Babylon, purity wasn't born, it was manufactured, and like all things crafted in the name of holiness, it demanded sacrifice. The minds of these boys were reshaped through repetition, fear, and the constant threat of eternal punishment. But here's what most never realized. This wasn't just spiritual, it was political. Controlling the pure meant controlling the empire. And what begins as devotion quickly becomes domination. In Babylon's official liturgy, Ku Erish didn't exist. No tablet described it openly. No priest mentioned it in chants. Yet it was real and left scars even time couldn't erase. The term survives in fragments, cited by peripheral scribes, tied to pain, sacrifice, and ritual transformation of flesh. It was the ceremony that stripped Kashu of their childhood. Not a baptism, a rupture. At the temple's center, beneath columns etched with gold and astral signs, boys were led in blindfolded, their garments removed, their bodies anointed with aromatic oils laced with hallucinogens. Around them, masked priests with lion visages chanted in a forgotten tongue. The purpose wasn't just spiritual, it was anatomical. Pain wasn't incidental, it was instrumental. The scream, the reflex, was seen as proof the body still resisted. That resistance had to be broken. The tool used in the ritual appears in scattered visual records. A hooked bronze blade, its tips scorched black. It wasn't symbolic, it was surgical. Flesh was marked, blood was spilled, submission was extracted, and the altar soaked with offerings, not of grain or incense, but of youth and suffering. The boy who entered never truly returned, if he returned at all. But one detail makes it even more disturbing. This wasn't a one-time ordeal. It was cyclical, annual, repeated. Older Kashu watched the younger endure it. The cycle perpetuated, not out of faith, but programming. Pain slowly ceased to be exception. It became language, and the temple, far from being sanctuary, became a mechanism. The temple taught that suffering was a passage, but not everybody survived the crossing. During the reign of Nabu Shuma Uken, the first cracks began to show within the Kashu ranks. A 13-year-old boy died during Ku Erish. His body was buried in silence beneath the temple floor. No prayers, no name. But the silence didn't last. A dismissed servant, punished for defiance, whispered of screams echoing at night. She spoke of boys with marks on their arms, of rituals ending in sobs. More voices followed, more deaths, more breaks. One young priest began carving symbols into his skin during morning chants. Another jumped from the ziggurat, shouting, "Marduk feeds on our soul!" The high priests didn't deny it. They tightened control. Longer fasts, harsher punishments, absolute isolation. The ritual couldn't be questioned. Purity was non-negotiable, but faith had already mutated into fear. And fear spreads fast. The Kashu, once flawless symbols of divine order, began to falter. Trembling hands, memory lapses, light aversion. Some stopped speaking. Others stopped sleeping. One, the same unnamed survivor of the opening ritual, began muttering broken phrases. After one slip in a chant, he was locked in a stone cell for 6 days, fed only bread, water, and smoke. When he emerged, something inside him had died. Devotion had turned to emptiness. But here's what most missed. The collapse wasn't just psychological. It was structural. The temple walls began to crack. The scent of rot overpowered the incense. And what was meant to cleanse had begun to infect. After the ritual, he was paraded as a survivor. Lifted up as a symbol of purity, fed honey and pomegranate, and walked through Babylon's streets to applause. But at night, his mind refused to sleep. The visions returned with the scent of scorched bronze, the sound of hooks, the masked eyes. He stopped sleeping. His hands shook. His voice cracked during chants. The temple called it weakness, ordered isolation, and in the dark cell, he shattered. When he returned, the light in his eyes was gone. Faith had turned to emptiness. He walked in short steps, avoided light, flinched at touch. Lesions bled during full moon rites. Some called it divine cleansing, but few could look at him for long. Other Kashu followed the same path. Some went mute. Others tried to flee, dragged back and broken. One was found in the sacred garden chewing holy lily petals. The illusion of divine order began to collapse. Yet he remained. At 20, he collapsed during a moon ceremony. They didn't declare him dead. They tied him upright, painted his face, and forced him to finish the rite. From then on, he was moved to the lower levels of the ziggurat, a place with no light, no visitors. His body decayed in silence, fed through tubes. The wounds no longer healed. The stench never left. But the most disturbing part was what he whispered. One night, during a storm, he opened his eyes and said, "They are watching from beneath." The acolyte ran in terror. Priests called it delirium, yet ordered the ritual chamber to be cleansed. From that moment, no one used his name. He became unspoken. But something down there kept breathing. His death was never declared. It was feared. During the Akitu festival, while the city celebrated renewal, he took his final breath in silence. There were no chants, no rites, only panic. The body, already disfigured, was found by the acolyte, stiff, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if interrupted mid-scream. The priests didn't mourn. They acted as if covering up a crime. No grieving allowed. They ordered the corpse removed in secrecy, wrapped in rotting linen, doused in myrrh to hide the stench. He was buried among shattered idols and animal bones. No name, no record. But the temple changed. Servants refused to enter the lower halls. Some claimed to hear breathing behind the walls. A priest fell ill, raving in fever, whispering, "He's not gone, just beneath." Offerings rotted before dawn. Incense could no longer mask the odor. The high priest aged rapidly. His voice cracked mid-sermon. Babylon itself began to unravel. Faith weakened. The stars no longer aligned with prophecy. Harvests failed. Plagues struck cattle. Stillbirths multiplied. But no one dared speak the Kashu's name. He had been exalted, sacrificed, erased, and now, perhaps, avenged. The gods no longer answered. Or maybe they had finally gone silent, ashamed of what had been done in their name. In time, Babylon fell, first to the Persians, then to time itself. The temples were buried in sand, the ziggurats crumbled, and the gods became symbols of a forgotten age. But something remained. In the 19th century, excavators found clay tablets near the ruins of Marduk's temple. Many contained typical prayers. Others did not. Some bore brief, urgent phrases. The vessel must not speak. The eye beneath the earth. Red cord forbidden. These weren't prayers. They were warnings. Scholars dismissed these fragments as religious metaphor. But one tablet, written in archaic Adian, stood out. It described a child of purity who returned with rotting flesh and mentioned a ritual whose failure had cursed the city. It ended with 3 words: "He is beneath." Few archaeological finds in Babylon have caused as much unease, not because of what was said, but because of what it implied. This wasn't just about a forgotten body. It was a wound still open, in the heart of one of history's greatest civilizations. A reminder that sometimes the sacred is nothing more than a veil for the unbearable. The story of the boy who decayed beneath Babylon's temples may never be fully confirmed, but its fragments, scattered across clay, myth, and silence, speak enough. This isn't just about a forgotten ritual. It's about an entire structure built on the idea that purity justifies anything, even destruction. In trying to forge a sacred body, they created a living ruin. In seeking perfection, they consumed the soul. When faith is used to justify suffering, the sacred stops being a bridge and becomes a prison. And that is what Babylon built, stone by stone, until its very foundations began to crack. The temple that claimed to hear the gods ignored the screams of its own children. The empire that called itself eternal was corroded not by war or famine, but by what it refused to face. And so, the forgotten boy became not a symbol of faith, but of silence. A reminder that some screams still echo, even when no one listens anymore.